Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Living the Sweet Life. I'm your host TJ Sweet, and on this podcast we are committed to helping you get from where you are to where you want to be. And that's in every area of your life. And we're going to help you do that by helping you reshape your mindset, live with intention, and look at the world through a grateful lens. And I just want to remind you now to go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you get notifications when these episodes come out every Monday. As you know, we call them Mindset Monday because as we win the day, we win the week. And so this episode this week is really going to touch on how to reshape your mindset, also help you live with intention. And then obviously we're going to talk about different ways that looking at the world through a grateful lens can really impact your entire life. Not just how you see the world, but how you treat the world and how you treat yourself. This week's going to cause a little bit more self-reflection. This is something that I've been working on. This is a skill that I've been working on for a really long time, and I continue to work on every day because it's probably the number one thing I've been able to do to connect with people, whether it's here on this podcast, whether it's on stage, whether it's with my coaching clients, whether it's just the people that I get to have in my life that I'm the most grateful for. It's this one skill of developing and cultivating emotional intelligence. We've all heard about emotional intelligence, but I really want to dive deeper into that because if you're not constantly working on it, it's probably something that's leaving you behind. That's probably something that may actually be the reason why you don't feel certain ways in certain conversations in certain moments, but also emotional intelligence will lead to the decisions that you're making and the words that you're using and the actions that you're taking. But the number one thing that emotional intelligence can help you with that we all need more of, especially these days, is connecting with yourself. It's really hard to get distracted by looking at other people all the time with social media and everything else, but connecting with yourself and connecting with others. We are meant to be social, which doesn't mean on social media. We're meant to be social as in together, but spending time together doesn't mean two people. It doesn't only mean, right? It can, depending on the relationship, but it doesn't just mean sitting in a room and spending physical time together. It means actually being plugged in, asking questions, paying attention to each other. Now that starts with emotional intelligence about ourselves and being in touch with yourself. There's multiple components when you talk about emotional intelligence, and yes, people will call it, one of the, they'll call it a soft skill, but I'll tell you, once you understand self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, motivation, some of these different things, you really start to live and learn to live with intention. Because as we've talked about, the thoughts that we have leads to the feelings that we have, leads to the choices that we make, but we keep trying to change our choices without understanding what was the thought that got us there in the first place. So self-awareness is the first step to all of this, right? So that's just understanding why you feel what you feel and why you think what you think. Self-regulation is, okay, now that you feel the way that you feel, what are the habits and choices you're making? So how do you regulate, right, your impulsiveness, your desire for things? How do you regulate that? And then empathy is all about connecting to others, because we're never really fully communicating if we're not paying attention to how the other person hears us. To really pour into people and to commit to people, we have to be empathetic because we have to understand, what are they going through? What is a day in a life in their shoes look like? Because that directly impacts, it should, how you treat them, how you communicate with them. If they have certain triggers, what are you doing to make sure that you don't trigger them? But when it comes to empathy, it's not just an understanding. It's a matter of really digging in and caring enough to be empathetic so that you learn how to treat people in a way that makes them feel seen, valued, heard, and appreciated. And so as we kind of break down some of these things, it's really understanding that they contribute and they impact your own personal well-being and cultivating stronger relationships. And so if you're in a relationship and you recognize that certain things that you say or certain things that your partner says causes an emotional state, right? So whenever you recognize how you're feeling and then how you treat the person that you're with, if you slow down enough to actually be grateful for the person that you're with and be grateful for who they are, because we kind of bring all of our components of our lives together in the relationships that we have. And so there's things about my life and my relationships, whether it's, with a partner or with my family, to where I recognized why I said what I said and why I felt what I felt, and I owned it. Because we're not always going to be perfect, but once you stop and really own kind of your own thoughts, actions, and behaviors through self-awareness, you start to then self-regulate. A lot of times, again, like we said, we try to self-regulate, which is the choices, but we don't actually stop and think about why did we make the choice we made in the first place. So, for example, with my family, I don't live near them right now. And I get, whenever I go back, I have this sense of, I feel like I'm a stranger around my own family. They love me and they care for me and they talk to me. We talk all the time, but there's something about me, my self-awareness, something about me that I need to process to then love them in the way that they love me. And it's not anything that they're doing. It's just a matter of I need to process some things so that I treat them in a way that I don't feel like a stranger. Because there have been times where I've been told by my family certain things, and I get short. I get kind of triggered by it, but I just think they don't know me, but they do. And maybe it's just a matter of, I wish I were with them more. And really understanding, I want to be more a part of their lives instead of feeling like a stranger, because they're not doing anything to make me feel like a stranger in my own family. And granted, truthfully, I haven't really talked to them a lot about this because it was me. I needed to own it. And then I've shared some of it with I have two older sisters. I've shared it with my sisters and my parents and just kind of talked about how I'm working through that and just owning, if you catch me kind of feeling a little distant, just snap me back in, of which they always do. They're wonderful people and I have a wonderful family. But I had to be self-aware enough to know, why was I getting triggered? And it was just because of choices that I was making of not being invested and plugged into them enough. So understanding that the relationships that we have aren't just set it and forget it. The relationships we have with empathy, with self-awareness, with self-regulation are real. They're certain. And they're not based on circumstance. They're based on love and recognizing that we all have something that we're going through and something that we're growing through. Now, how do we improve some of these things, besides obviously the idea that, yes, it makes sense. The more I'm self-aware, the better choices I'll make and the more caring and loving I'll be for other people. If it were only that easy, it's not that easy. But really, there are different ways that we can slow down and be more present. Because again, you have to understand yourself first before you'll really be able to make better choices that you'd be proud of for the people that you love and you're the most grateful for. And so some of the things that I do, some of the things that I've had to do throughout my journey is really, and it's all things that we've talked about before, but I want to do a different spin on it. But really being somebody who's willing to journal, to write down, and people say, I don't have time for that. I'm going to challenge you to say you don't have time to not do that. But being more mindful. And, obviously one of the things that I get to do is I get to coach people in life and in business. What I really do is I really more reflect back. I kind of put a mirror in front of them and re-ask questions about, why do you think you're making the choices you're making? And then they start to dig into the emotional piece and okay, is that really true? Or is that a perception? And then as they go through, well, no, I just perceived that. And I'm okay, well, can you do anything about that? Yes or no? Well, no, I can't do anything about that. I'm well, what can you do instead? And then they get to the outcome they wanted. But that starts with self-awareness of recognizing that our emotions actually help us make decisions. But if we're not in charge of our emotions and we don't understand why we're doing what we're doing, which can sometimes come from not healing from things that we're hiding. So you do have to recognize, what are some things, what are some painful experiences you've had in your life? What are some things about kind of your emotional state from day to day? I'm a pretty high energy guy. I wake up excited for the day. I'm grateful, pretty much all the time. I'm an optimistic guy. I'm a hopeful guy. I love to help other people. That's just kind of my emotional state. But that doesn't come by accident. It comes with, kind of constantly evaluating why, right? And so If you're not focused on purpose, you're going to be distracted by pleasure. And I've fallen into that. I've had to work myself back out of being focused more on pleasure and just enjoying life and less on purpose, which purpose actually is pleasure for me, but it's kind of one of these things where I have to constantly evaluate it about why am I making the choices I'm making? Is it because I've continuing to pursue my purpose, or do I need more of just kind of enjoying it? Which again, there's no right answer, but just understanding why you're making the choices you're making is important. You know, whenever you start to manage your emotions, you start to have more emotions that you actually want to have, that actually help you live the life you want to be living. Because once you start to recognize that the relationships that you have can directly be impacted by the way you regulate your emotions and the way that you show empathy towards the people that you get to have in your life, it really starts to transform the power, right, of your emotions. And emotional intelligence starts with recognizing it and then doing something with it. But when you start to have this emotional awareness, it leads to more authentic connections. And, you know, it's one of those things to where I ask people, the people that I get to have in my life, the people I'm most grateful for, how can I show up for you? And that's only because I've created space to listen to however, I don't come into it with an expectation, but however I can show up for them matters. But it's because I've done the work for myself, for my own emotional awareness of understanding that I care about these people and I love these people and I want to serve them. And I always have more to give because I'm constantly doing things to fill my cup, and the people around me fill my cup. Even when I get to give to them, it makes me feel good. And a good friend of mine teases me about this gratitude for this journey that I've been on, and he does it as well. And he started to recognize that it feels actually really good when you practice gratitude and you do good things for people that you're grateful for, because then it feels good and you want to do it more. So it's a little self-serving, but at the same time you're giving. But that's the whole point of recognizing what feels good and what doesn't. And the things that don't feel good, why is it happening? Do you want to keep doing it, or can you make a change and actually start making choices that lead you to the life that you want to be living? But once you start to have some of these relationships to where you can be vulnerable enough to say, I'm healing from this, you know, and I've talked about this before too, but really the conflicts that we have in our lives are typically not rooted just in the moment. It's typically rooted in moments before that we weren't willing to talk about why we were triggered, or moments in the past that we're not healed from yet, that because they're so close to the surface. So if you know that, you know, you have kind of emotional triggers when somebody says something to you that it does something else, but you don't really want to talk about it. Once you start to own that, have the self-awareness to then share it with somebody else, they'll start taking different action because they know how it impacts you. That's empathy, right? So once you start giving people the chance to actually understand you more, not figure you out. We're never meant to be figured out. As humans, we're never going to be figured out. We're all trying to focus on this idea of being understood, but it's also having somebody be on the path who's more curious about us than has us figured out. The relationships that I've been in and the people that I get to have in my life, if we have a conflict, it's real, it's authentic, it's in the moment. I own my stuff whenever it comes to why I responded the way I responded. I'm not perfect. The goal is not perfect. The goal is just owning why you feel what you feel and then healing and growing from it. I'm convinced that we're all on this healing journey. We're all on a growing journey, but our willingness to accept that and then do the work to heal from it that started with self-awareness, that led to self-regulation, will make us more empathetic to ourselves and to the people that we get to love in our lives. So now you're probably thinking, okay, all this sounds great, but how do I do this? It's not easy. I'd love to help if you have more questions about this. This is a journey that I'm always on, but it's so important for you to stop and think about, why do you keep making the choices you're making? And why do you keep choosing things? Why do you do things to relieve stress? Do the things that you're doing to relieve stress when you feel stressed, right? That's your self-awareness. Are you doing something to make you feel less stressed or to shift the stress for another day? That's self-regulation. So love yourself enough to live a healthy lifestyle in your mind and in your body. So one of the things you can do that I do, still do all the time, is I do kind of, you can call it an emotion journal. And I know people don't like to talk about emotions, but those are the people who just aren't really willing to accept and ready to own their own emotions because they don't want to talk about them. But when you start to journal your own emotions about how do you feel at different points in the day? How do you feel when you first wake up? How do you feel at lunchtime in the middle of the day? And how do you feel whether it's dinner time or right before you go to bed? Like, be honest about it, not how you want to feel, but then write down what you're actually feeling and then why. Why did it feel that way? Because you deserve for not every day to go by so fast, but you deserve to have intentional moments throughout the day to where you check in with yourself and think, you know what, if you are actually happy, when was the last time you said that instead of just riding that wave? So actually say, you know what, I'm happy. Or if you're stressed, write down why. Like, I'm stressed and here's why. Can you do anything about it? Yes, no. Like, that's the self-awareness piece. But if what I ask people all the time, when's the last time you felt joy? And most people can't tell me because they haven't slowed down enough in the moments of joy to recognize that's what they're actually feeling, even though that's the thing that they say that they're actively pursuing. So if we don't slow down enough to recognize where we are, we're not going to recognize when we're in a new place. But then you also have to do this relationship piece, right? So yes, there's this emotional piece. But the other challenge I have for you is to focus on a conversation to where you can actually practice active listening. This is empathy, and reflect on the differences that it makes as you start doing some of these things. So even if this feels uncomfortable, good. Uncomfortable means good. It means growth. But I want you to commit to doing this for a month and just be curious. Don't go into it expecting something. Just start it knowing that something will happen if your heart is open and your mind is open. Because once you start to recognize that self-awareness is something you're probably not great at all the time, you'll start to really work on that. And then when you start making choices, I want you to start thinking about, why did I make that choice? Don't beat yourself up for it. Just own it. Just stay in this curiosity chapter while you work on your self-awareness so that you can make better choices. And then you start to treat people in a different way because you also understand other people are also going through similar things. And there's a lot of things in life where we talk about, we don't know what other people are going through. And it's not perfect, but it's true. But there's people who are going through more things than we'll ever know as we walk by them, as we drive next to them, as we sit with them. But if we're open enough, we're self-aware enough to create space for each other, to really talk to each other, and then regulate our emotions to be able to share some of these things, we'll have more empathy for each other and build relationships rooted in being seen and valued and appreciated for who we are, but also helping each other heal and grow, not just waiting for everyone to be grown and healed. Help people along their way. Help yourself along your journey as well. So I hope this episode has really resonated with you. I hope it makes you stop and think a little bit more about self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, all the things that are actually going on in your head at all times, but you're not necessarily slowing down enough to pay attention to how they're impacting your life. I appreciate you listening to this episode. I appreciate you being aware enough that there's always room to grow. And for tuning in every week, hit that subscribe button so you get notifications so that self-regulation can kick in, that you're still learning and growing. And just know that your effort by listening and watching makes a difference in my life and the lives of the people that you get to have in your life as well. And I'll remind you, like I do on every episode, that you always have the power and the choice to reshape your mindset, live with intention, and look at the world through a grateful lens. Until the next episode, never stop.